All right, welcome to today's show. So we've got MicroStrategy at 3:15 in the pre-market before it opens up tomorrow. Close at 3:04 on Friday. I'm also going to walk you through plans by Howard Lutnick, which is Trump's Secretary of Commerce, and how he thinks we get to a 10x on Bitcoin. I'm going to walk you through some comments from other analysts that think MicroStrategy price point could be X, and I'll share what that is in a moment. And then I'm going to walk you through some other things in terms of just the viewpoint of what's going to happen before April 2nd from Tom Lee. So I'm going to give you a little breakdown here in today's presentation. So let's jump right in. All right. So first thing is, let's talk about the Bitcoin and MicroStrategy breakdown. April 2nd prediction coming in from Tom Lee here. He says the markets will bottom before April 2nd. So he gave the example, like in 1962, there was the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he said the bottom came before the resolution of it. So just like we've had a little bit of a crisis with the drop recently, the bottom will typically come before the resolution. So history suggests that a rebound will actually come fast here. And during the Cuban Missile Crisis, it was a 12-day event, he said, and the market bottomed on day 7. And then recovered 2/3 of the losses before the crisis ended. So Tom Lee believes a similar pattern is likely here, that the losses will be recovered before the crisis ends, which of course, the crisis being the drop in the market, in case you're just joining us, right? But good news that we got the MicroStrategy price point is up to 313 or 315 right now pre-market, which is good. I think once we start breaking 318 and holding past 318, we're going up. Okay. Plan B, Plan B is known to be on and off before, but if you've ever followed his stuff, he does a lot of chart analysis. His contention on this, or his idea, I should say, is in 2023, we went from $20,000 Bitcoin to a $40,000 Bitcoin. 2024, $40,000 Bitcoin to an $80,000 Bitcoin. 2025, $80,000 to $160,000 Bitcoin. And 2026, $160,000 to $320,000. So basically, those numbers are saying, if we keep doubling, right? If we just keep doubling, that we could continue on this path, is what Plan B is saying. That like in 2023, you went from 20 to 40, 2024, 40 to 80. So what if it just keeps doubling? What if we don't go back through the phase of rocket up and then rocket down, and like a typical bull market and a bear market? So that's his prediction. I don't necessarily agree with it. I still think we're going to see a spike and a run up and then a drop down. But, everybody's got their analysis, and so we'll see what happens here. So who knows? In the comments, drop your comments. What do you think, guys? You think Bitcoin's just going to continue to go up and do doubles over the year? Or do you think we're going to have a run up in 2025 or 2026 and then a spike down? Let me know your thoughts. So, and then in the phases of Bitcoin has different phases according to Plan B. So there's an accumulation phase. So if you look back in, I think, 2023, it was about $15K to $40,000. And that was the accumulation phase where people were buying it up when it was low. And then you get into a bull market. We're calling this the early bull, or I should say that Plan B is calling this the early bull. And he says from 40,000 to about 100,000 is the early bull market. And then eventually in every Bitcoin phase, you go into a distribution phase to where there's sell-offs. He does not think we're in the distribution phase, even though there has been sell-offs by retail investors and the ETFs have been outflowing Bitcoin. He does not think that we're in the distribution phase yet, and he does not think we're in the bear market. So that's basically Plan B's analysis of what's going on right now based on the 4 phases of the bull market. Anthony Scaramucci, he says every bull run has sharp dips. So his current prediction is that the bottom would be at 70K. And we've of course hit about 76K weeks ago or a month ago. And then the end of 2025 price target, he's still hovering around 180K. I know he said about 200K or 180K, but as of recent analysis, around 180K is his prediction still. Moves on MicroStrategy, aka strategy, or I should say strategy, aka MicroStrategy, or just eliminate MicroStrategy, say strategy. But they launched a preferred stock, Strife, as you guys know. It's different than their preferred stock of Strike. So Strife is an additional preferred stock with a 10 to 12% yield. Apparently, when they released it, the plan was to pay out a 10% yield to investors. So basically, these preferred stocks, so are basically fixed returns, to put it in simple words. So it's more of a fixed return. You get a lot of institutional investors that are interested in stuff like this. People who are looking for more safe stuff like pension funds, insurance companies. Of course, you would have to be a little bit more of a riskier or futuristic pension fund or insurance company to invest in strategy, but they're designed more to attract investors like that, who are used to investing in bonds or T-bills and things like that, and they want a more upside return that's on a fixed basis. So rather than getting the typical 4 or 5% they get, they're going after like a 10%, 12% yield here, which is what MicroStrategy is offering. Initially, when Strategy came out with the offering, they were offering it up at $100 per share. And I don't think the take rate was as high as they wanted, so they lowered it down to $85. And so I think the numbers come out to, instead of issuing about 5 million, they issued 8.5 million. I'm going from memory here. And so that enabled them to raise more money and buy more Bitcoin. Strategies raised $711 million to buy more Bitcoin. And recently they also bought 130 Bitcoin. That gets them to 500,000 Bitcoin owned. So now we know that Strategy MSTR is still the number one holder of Bitcoin. That's no surprise. And Saylor sees a $5 million Bitcoin in the future. When, we don't know. I've also heard him say price predictions coming up in 2045 would be a $13 million Bitcoin, according to Saylor, or in a bear case scenario, a $3 million Bitcoin. So five is a little on the bear side if you're looking at 2045, but I don't know what date he said that by. It's just a recent interview or article that was from. So there was also a video recently that I watched with Mr. Wonderful. If you ever watch him, he's pretty in the know in terms of investments and things like that, and has some good advice. His perspective from an institutional standpoint is that two things need to pass for institutions to get in more. And there's something called the Genius Act, which is also referred to as the stable coin law, and basically is a regulation for stable coins. And so what he's saying there is, obviously institutions want to get involved in this, but there's got to be clear regulation on this. And right now, there's not fully clear regulation on that. They're sorting it out. And then when you have under $10 billion in this scenario, you would have the states who would be overseeing it. And then if you have over $10 billion, you would have the feds or federal regulation that's overseeing it. But the whole thing here is that it must be backed 1-for-1 with real dollars. So if they take in one stable coin, it's got to be backed fully. So there's no messing around and no like, hey, we really are holding money here, and they're not holding money here. So the regulation has to be pretty sound here. And according to him, if the regulation is sound and this stable coin law is like fully clear and put into place, that this would be big for institutions pouring into the crypto space. So that's good. There's also something on market rules. He talks about the FIT21 Act, clarifies if crypto is a commodity or a security. The SEC determines whether things are centralized or securities. And then you have the CFTC talking about things being decentralized or commodities. So the CFTC controls the commodity market, which is like wheat, oil, gold, things of that nature. And obviously the securities market controls securities like stocks. So obviously there's been things coming out on this and all kinds of talk on this and things that are being, I should say, legislated or reviewed right now. But this is big for institutional involvement and institutions pouring in, which is cool, right? Now if we just zoom out a little bit, this has been the talk for the last several years. And when you look at what a lot of analysts are saying on this, you still have analysts that are singing the tune, or critics that are singing the tune, that Bitcoin has no value. And it's amazing how people still do say this, but the idea is that people who do say this really haven't studied it. People who do say this really don't understand it, and people who do say this just make these comments for whatever reason, whether it's their belief system or whether they think they have real data on it. I think it's just false data, because we know that that Bitcoin is obviously not backed by anything, quote unquote, but the dollar is also not backed by anything either. And so what you're really looking at here is that these types of money, quote unquote, they're really backed by trust, per se, is what some of the critics say. And so in particular, obviously the dollar is backed by the trust that we have in the US government and the Fed. So clearly that is a big component of where the dollar gets its value, because it's not backed by gold and has been backed by gold since the Nixon standard, since Nixon took it off the gold standard. So we know that the dollar doesn't really have any intrinsic value whatsoever. People say also that Bitcoin doesn't have any intrinsic value because it's not like a stock, and it is not a stock, it's a commodity. And like a stock will have cash flows and earnings reports and utility. And many argue that Bitcoin doesn't have that, which it doesn't. It doesn't have, earnings reports. It doesn't have dividends. It doesn't have any of that. But when you look into the technology of Bitcoin, obviously people who say Bitcoin has no value, it has no intrinsic value, they don't understand the properties of Bitcoin. So we continue to hear this as we go into the marketplace. And I just think this is, critics coming out of the woodworks for whatever agendas they have to obviously knock it down. But I think it's important just to look from one's own perspective of what is Bitcoin really, and to get educated on it. So we obviously know that Bitcoin, if you're comparing it to other assets, it has a limited supply, which is obviously 21 million Bitcoin only. We know that 15 million is really what's there, because about 5 or 6 million Bitcoin are lost forever. And we also know that people compare it to digital gold. And so when you look at its comparison, you stack it up against the dollar has unlimited printing, and you've got basically a fiat trust system. So when you stack up value comparison, because it may not have intrinsic value like stocks do per se, but when you stack up value comparison, it's super clear that Bitcoin obviously is far, far, far superior in terms of its technology, in terms of its supply, in terms of its decentralization. And in terms of many other properties it has, it's far superior in terms of its technology to the dollar, from my viewpoint. Okay, and so critics will say neither have intrinsic value, and I can definitely see that point. I can't see the point that both are necessarily belief systems, but I do see the point that both are backed by trust. Like if you have enough trust that the public has in Bitcoin, more people are going to go into agreement and they're going to buy it. If you have enough trust in the dollar, more people are going to be like, great, I want to hold the dollar. But you could say that about the stock market too, right? The trust that people have in the stock of whether it's going to go up or down and whether they're going to sell or not. So you can make comparisons to all of them, but I think just looking at the properties of Bitcoin is an important thing to look at, as opposed to listening to what critics have to say who don't understand the properties of Bitcoin. Howard Lutnick's Bitcoin plan I thought was pretty interesting. If you take a look at this. So Lutnick basically says that he's Trump's Secretary of Commerce, by the way. And so, Lutnick, he owns $1 billion of strategy himself. So this is just really, fascinating to me. If we just analyze and look at who's inside, hanging out with Trump, spending time with Trump, it's Trump's Secretary of Commerce. I don't think he's going to put $1 billion bet on MicroStrategy if he doesn't think that the future is good. Make sense? And you just got to just take a look at that. Obviously, he owns Bitcoin as well. He owns MicroStrategy as well. And his proposal is to sell gold to buy more Bitcoin, and also to sell gold green cards. And what gold green cards are is, obviously we know what a green card is, right? You give somebody a green card so they can come over to the United States. But the proposal there is selling these gold green cards, quote unquote, to high net worth investors, and giving these high net worth investors green cards, and like selling them like 200,000 of them for like $5 million a pop to these investors. And so that idea, again, is budget neutral strategies. And so if we were to sell 200,000 of these green cards at $5 million a pop, that's $1 trillion. And so that would be $1 trillion that we could utilize to either pay down some debt, service the debt, or reallocate some of this money into Bitcoin. So he proposes selling the gold, selling some of our gold, proposes selling green cards, like gold green cards, to people who live internationally who want a green card, and they have to be high net worth investors. And then that's how we would raise additional money. And then the proposal is to use $300 billion of that to buy Bitcoin. So the point is, on all of this, it's just interesting because you have many different ways that people are proposing to buy Bitcoin. I was reading Pomp's newsletter the other day, and I shared some points on the other day that I want to give credit on, which are, he talked about the surplus of cheese that the U.S. has in reserves. I think we have like $1.4 billion of surplus of cheese. You could sell some of that. The Senator Lummis, as he was interviewing her, was talking about the amount of gold that we have that's not actually valued in today's pricing. So if we did an inventory and found out how much gold we really have, and we valued it at today's market price would be higher than what we bought it at years ago. And so there would be a budget neutral strategy to go and buy more Bitcoin. So there's so many different ways that the US could figure out to buy more Bitcoin that would completely boost the value of Bitcoin. And as Howard Lutnick says, boost the value by 10x. So I think that's a great strategy, using 300 billion to buy more Bitcoin. And I think Howard Lutnick is on the right path. I think we listen to people like this who are close to Trump, who are on the inside path, who are entrepreneurial, who believe in Bitcoin, who understand strategies that are intelligent and smart to buy more Bitcoin, and also who owns $1 billion worth of MicroStrategy. I'd say the guy's pretty damn progressive. What do you think, guys? It's good to see you all in here. We got Chad in here. We got Anthony in there. We got John. So I think these are cool ideas. And I love listening to forward-thinking, progressive people like this, like Lutnick. Also, I did a video a while ago on the history of money. It's actually, I went in depth for like 25 minutes in the history of money. And if you really look at the history of money in different nations and civilizations across time and across the world, there's always been a dilution of money. And there's always been a printing of money. And it doesn't seem like nations have ever figured out a way to get out of the printing of money. If you remember me doing this video a long time ago, I talked about Rome, and even Rome was diluting their gold, and they were mixing their gold with tin. And so you had the apparency that there was this gold, and that the gold had a high degree of value, and they were diluting it with tin. So that was the dilution of a currency at the time. We have Weimar Germany, if you remember, after the war, and they had all these war reparations where they had to, make up for the damages they caused, and they printed way too much money, and they had hyperinflation at that time. And what they did is there was actually, this is true, people had wheelbarrows of money, like literally cash, where they were rolling the cash to go buy loaves of bread. And it got so bad during this time, you can fact check me on this, that the money became so worthless that they were actually using the money to keep themselves warm, and they were burning the money because the paper was worthless. People forget about these times, but this was only back, 60, 70 years ago, 80 years ago, maybe. So you're looking about entire countries that have just fallen to pieces, or at least their currencies have completely collapsed because of the printing of money. And so as you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the U.S. needs a strategy to actually get out of debt. Let's not forget, we have $36 trillion worth of debt. And so I think, number one, what Trump is doing is the right thing. I think what Elon's doing is the right thing. You have to whack the budget. You got to cut costs. And the ridiculousness of some of these costs that are existing in the U.S. government today is sad. I mean, the basis that 20 million people are receiving payments on Social Security that are either dead, or it hasn't been transferred then to the spouse's name as the survivor. I mean, that's ridiculous. So there's so many things that need to be done for this U.S. economy. And if you live in another country, great. You'll see that the money printing exists in your country too. Take a look at India, take a look at China, take a look at Japan. So we have this money printing that's existed in nations for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years and even thousands of years. If you go back to the Yuan dynasty, it was one of the initial countries that started really debasing the currency. So this overprinting has gone on. It went on in Venezuela. If you look at Argentina and the inflation that exists in there, look at the history of the inflation: 100%, 80%, 60%, like crazy, ridiculous inflation. In Zimbabwe, they actually had $100 trillion bills. I mean, this is a systemic problem for every government pretty much that's existed since the beginning of time. So when you get your finger just on the money printing button, like any nation can, you got trouble. And so if you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, and I also was, I don't have all the data on tariffs, but some of the things that I saw with what Trump is trying to do, yes, it's scaring the markets. Yes, people are concerned about it, but there has to be change that takes place. Otherwise, we're going to go bankrupt. And we're already a country that is in serious, serious debt. And I think the debt that we pay out in terms of the interest payment is more than the GDP of what we produce. Fact check me on that, but it's ridiculous. So these are measures that need to be taken. And I think we're looking at, of course, we want the dollar to be strong for those of us who live in the US, but also the world wants the dollar to be strong because a lot of the world depends on the strength of the dollar. So this is a big deal. And I think the actions that Trump is taking, while other countries may not like it, a lot of this is to even the playing field on tariffs. I forget what country it is, but there's something like a 243% tariff. And I can't remember if it's with Canada on butter or if it's India on sugar, but there's a tariff of 243%. And so what the US is trying to do is even out the tariffs and ding back with another tariff on something else for 243%. So eventually, if you have nations or countries, I should say, that are swapping out tariffs, and it's like, hey, I'm going to charge you 243% and you're going to charge me 243%. Well, eventually the tariffs would just cancel out. It's like, why would I charge you 243% and I'm going to get charged 243%? Like, why would I do that if I'm a country and we're two countries that are trading with each other? Why don't we just get rid of the tariffs on that from that perspective and have free trade? So there's that viewpoint on it as well. But I totally agree with what's happening right now. I think that what Elon and Trump are doing is extremely intelligent. I think it's basic freaking accounting. And I think anybody who can't see that can't see basic math and can't see that something needs to be done. Yes, there's people that are losing jobs and nobody likes to see that. But at the end of the day, when you stop producing in a job, you lose it. Okay? You got to produce and you got to create a product and you got to create something that's going to serve in exchange with people. And if you don't, your job's gone. And that's the way it should be run. So I think that we are in the money printing phase, and we have been for a long, long time. And Bitcoin is the way out. Companies that are going to put Bitcoin on their balance sheet, like Strategy. I always say MicroStrategy because I like it better. I like the sound better. But companies that are going to put Bitcoin on their balance sheet, like MicroStrategy, and companies that continue to follow the playbook of Strategy are going to win. And that's the future. And so if you zoom out and you look at like, what is the path ahead? I don't know how you could be a government. I don't know how you could be a critic. I don't know how literally you can have people that sit here and say that Bitcoin is not the future. And I don't think you can sit here and say like what Strategy is doing is dangerous. I really don't think that what MicroStrategy is what they're doing is dangerous. And I know there's critics that say, wow, they're over leveraged and not going to be able to afford their debt payments. I just don't think that's the case. And in fact, they're not over leveraged. And so I think when you really stack it up and you take a look at what's going on and you zoom out, and the reason I showed that slide of money printing is because it has existed for years and years and years through almost every civilization. And eventually the civilization or the country crashes. And that's not a good thing. So what is the option? What's the choice? Bitcoin is the choice. And for companies that are sitting on melting icebergs, like when Strategy made the decision in 2020 that they're going to take their reserves and they're going to buy Bitcoin with it, the reason they did that is because they didn't see a future for themselves. They literally said, if we hold $250 or $500 million and we put it in T-bills and we earn 3 or 4%, when the printing of money is at 7% on average over the last 100 years, And in bad years, it's 20%. So when you look at that, they really didn't see that they had a choice. And so when I zoom out and I look at Strategy's move, which is intelligent, thinking in the future, and then you zoom out and you look at what governments need to do, thinking in the future, this whole printing of money, it just cannot continue to exist the way that it does. It just can't. And so what other solution out there, what other financial instrument exists out there that will actually create a solution long term for the US to get out of debt and for other countries to get out of debt? There is no other solution. Bitcoin is the only solution. If there was, it'd be implemented already. But the basic solution is great. Let's print some more money. Let's listen to what the Fed says. Let's try to push down inflation. Let's give reports on what inflation is when we know that's not what inflation is. We know when they're coming out with 2% or 3% reports on inflation. It's not true. We know it's not, because the basket of goods and services are rigged. It's rigged, right? Of what they put in there and they decide is going to be in the basket of goods and services that measures the CPI. So all of this stuff, when you look at it and zoom out, I think it's important in a time right now of uncertainty to zoom out and go, look at history. There's not a countries that I know that existed that haven't continued to print money. Okay, and look at the number of countries that have fallen as a result, or just their citizens just suffer. Look at Argentina. Still to this day, citizens are suffering. Look at in the United States, citizens are suffering. The world's in debt. So the critics who come on and say that, and I'm not saying critics of, like, those of us who have channels, the critics of the United States government. People are criticizing what the U.S. government is doing, considering bringing Bitcoin in, considering bringing crypto in. What is the other strategy? And cutting the freaking debt and the deficit. What other choices there? If somebody has a better plan, they would have done it in the last administration. They would have done it prior to that. They would have done it prior to that. This administration has the better plan. And you can see the better people are surrounding Trump. People like Lutnick. It's amazing what his plan is. I love the thing that he wrote up. The write-up was amazing. I'm like, hey, great. We could go and buy $300 billion worth of Bitcoin with this strategy. So yeah, I do think, and I'm also looking at, it's funny, we were joking the other day, I was joking with my girlfriend and her daughter about just like, animation and things like that, and how the younger generation just really understands animation. So like everything they see is animated, and like, so they see things so much differently. And we as an older generation, when we see a certain type of animation, we don't know like how good it is or how amazing it is, because the younger generation just lives on it. They breathe on it. And so they have the latest technology that comes out. They're like, that's good animation. Whereas I might see animation, I'd be like, oh, that looks like cool animation, but it's not the best. And so when you look at, the members, that are passing the laws here now in the U.S. government, you got an older crew, man. You got an older crew, and it's going to take them a little bit of time to understand Bitcoin, because most of the people that are going to be, that are in Congress and are in the Senate, they don't understand it. Come on. And the reality is we don't want a whole heck of a lot of bureaucracy sitting around making decisions. We don't. Unfortunately, they do get to vote on this stuff, but the entrepreneurs who are surrounding Trump, those are the people we want to listen to. I was watching a video with Trump the other day dealing with a leader of another country, and they were talking about, like, they were doing a deal and Trump was trying to double the deal, double the money. And you could tell how this leader was so outmatched, right, by an entrepreneur who knows how to do deals and knows how to close. And quite frankly, what I want leading our country is somebody who knows how to close deals. I want somebody who knows entrepreneurship. I want somebody who knows how to run money, not some bureaucrat sitting there who doesn't know his ass from his elbow. So I think we have an older generation in Congress. We have an older generation in Senate. We have new entrepreneurs and new blood coming in. But I think it's going to take a little bit of time for them to understand the technology and understand what Bitcoin really is. And so be it. But zoom out. What's the future? You know what I'm saying? That's all I got to say. What's the future have to be? So in closing on this, the ancient example that I just said, the Yuan dynasty, years ago, was one of the first to overuse paper money without gold backing. You go way back. I think this was like at 700. Go look up the date on it. It's a long, long time ago. Okay. And they started to overuse paper money without gold backing. Now look at us. 1971, we got off the gold standard. We haven't had gold backing for 50 years, 55 years. Do you think it's time for a change? Too much fake money equals collapse. End of story. Enough said, right? So that's the game. Just a little recap of today. In closing, I love Howard Lutnick's plan. I think that we should do what he's saying. I think we should come out with $300 billion net and buy Bitcoin with it. I still think Senator Lummis's plan is great. 200,000, 200,000, 200,000, 200,000. Although in her interview the other day, when Pomp was interviewing her, she seemed a little bit like unsure of when things are going to happen. And of course, because the government and Congress and the Senate, they move slower, right? So we have that. And then also what I was talking about earlier today was, the new products that MicroStrategy is coming out with, which I think are pretty cool as well. And all those products are being, issued more on fixed rates of return for investors, which I think is just it's just insight into the fact that MicroStrategy has changed, or strategy has changed, I should say. It used to be stocks and convertible notes. Look at all these new products that they're coming out with. So yeah, we've had some trouble over the last couple months, but pre-market right now, if I go take a look, where are we at? We're at 312 right now pre-market. So maybe we'll open up in a big week, and then we'll see what Tom Lee says. Tom Lee seems to have a good handle on the market. I've been following him. Seems pretty smart, but who knows? Who really has a handle on the market? So he says if we hit the bottom before April 2nd, the bottom should fall out before April 2nd. Hopefully we've already hit the bottom. Hopefully 85K is the bottom right now, and after April 2nd we'll go up, but who knows? I don't know what the price prediction is going to be. I think the most accurate price prediction this year was Josh Mann with an $84,000 Bitcoin on March 14th, closing at that exact 84,000. But what a prediction, right? So hope this serves you guys. Stay strong on your convictions and your beliefs, and always zoom out and look at the future. That's the best way to make decisions from my viewpoint. This is not financial advice, not investment advice, not tax advice, not legal advice. But I think you do have to really, you have to zoom out and take a look at the future and make decisions based on, what you see, where the puck is going, so to speak. And there's no question whatsoever that it's going towards Bitcoin. If it's going to go towards a financial instrument, it's going to go to one that's been around for the last, 15, 16, 17 years, right? So, and what new is on the horizon that you could say that it's going to be a better plan for the U.S. to park their money? It doesn't exist. Gold obviously is booming and is having a huge run right now. So many people are allocating a portion of their money into gold. But gold's been around for how many hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years, right? So what is the better instrument in the future? What is it? There's not one. And the S&P sure isn't the answer. So what is it? You can invest in tech companies, AI companies, sure. But what's the stable investment in the future for countries and for individuals? I think it's Bitcoin, not financial advice, but I think it's Bitcoin. So there you go. Hope it serves. And of course, MicroStrategy for those of us who like to play on the rocket rides. All right. So that's my spiel for today. Hope it serves you guys, and I'll see you on the other side.